Think about this for a second. A sitting president, the leader of a sovereign nation, is captured by a foreign military? It sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood movie, right? Well, it's not. It's exactly what just went down in Venezuela. And the stakes, well, they couldn't be any higher. This was the direct, very public warning from the President of the United States to Venezuela's new interim leader just hours after her predecessor was taken. I mean, you can't really call that diplomacy. That's a threat, laid bare on the world stage. The images that started to trickle out were just surreal. Nicolás Maduro, the guy who'd been running Venezuela since 2013, wasn't in a palace surrounded by guards. No, he was in a gray sweatsuit, blindfolded, and in the custody of American officials. It's a really potent symbol of a country's sovereignty being completely turned on its head, literally overnight. So that's the big question, isn't it? How did we get here? How does a political standoff, even a tense one, escalate into a full-blown military raid and the capture of a head of state? To really get what's happening now, we've got to look back at how this all started. Because look, this didn't just happen out of the blue. This was more like the explosive finale to years and years of mounting pressure, sanctions, and accusations flying back and forth between Washington and Caracas. Okay, so let's break it down. It all really kicks off in 2013 with Maduro's election. By 2020, the U.S. Justice Department has already hit him with these huge narco-terrorism charges. Then things get really messy after a very controversial election in 2024. And after that, things just accelerate like crazy. The U.S. cranks up the bounty on his head. President Trump gives the green light for covert CIA ops, and it all leads to this dramatic raid on January 2nd, 2026. And you know, a huge turning point in all this was that bounty. We're talking $50 million. That's not just some symbolic number. It was a crystal clear signal. It basically turned a political adversary into one of the most wanted men on the entire planet. All right, so that's the buildup. Now let's get into the operation itself, the actual military action that took this long simmering conflict and turned it into something, well, something pretty much unprecedented. So, in a dead of night, U.S. Special Forces made their move. And it was coordinated. They didn't just go after one building. They hit military bases across the capital before closing in on the presidential compound itself. In the end, they grabbed both Maduro and the First Lady, Cilia Flores. So, what was the official justification for all this? Well, it all comes down to one legal term: narco-terrorism. The U.S. indictment basically says Maduro wasn't just a corrupt leader, but the actual head of a drug cartel that was actively using cocaine as a weapon against the United States. Of course, it's a charge Maduro has always denied, saying it's just an excuse for regime change. And right in the middle of this incredibly high-stakes military raid, you get this moment that just sounds bizarre. As he's literally being taken into custody with his government crumbling, Maduro apparently looks at the American officials and just says, "Happy New Year." But let's be clear, this was far from a bloodless operation. While the U.S. has said there were no American casualties, the government of Cuba, a longtime Venezuelan ally, reported that 32 of its combatants who were stationed in the country were killed during the attacks. The moment the raid happened, a political firestorm just erupted back in the United States. It raised these huge fundamental questions about presidential power, about international law, and about America's place in the world. And the dividing line was incredibly stark. On one side, you had the Trump administration, which framed the whole thing as a law enforcement operation. They argued it was a move against drug traffickers and didn't need a sign-off from Congress. But critics, a lot of them Democrats, saw it completely differently. To them, this was an act of war, an illegal regime change operation that violated U.S. law. And this quote from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer really gets to the heart of the opposition's argument. He said, Maduro's a horrible person, but he argued that the U.S. can't just throw its own laws and principles out the window to go after him. So what was the end game here? Officially, the White House said the goal was a safe transition of power. But in some interviews, President Trump was a lot more blunt. He talked about the U.S. needing to run the country for a while, about American oil companies moving in, and about the goal being to get full access to Venezuela's huge oil reserves. Meanwhile, back in Caracas, with Maduro gone, you've got this sudden power vacuum. It gets filled pretty fast when the country's Supreme Court swears in Vice President Delcy Rodríguez as the new interim president. And yeah, she's the very same leader now facing those threats from President Trump. Now, the shockwaves from this operation didn't just stop at America's borders. Not even close. The capture of a sitting president by a foreign power sent this immediate and powerful jolt all through the international community. And the backlash from other countries was fast and widespread. You had this powerful group of Latin American nations, plus Spain, that put out a joint statement just blasting the action. I mean, even Colombia, whose President Trump had recently insulted, they signed on. And way on the other side of the world, China also called for Maduro to be released immediately. Their reasoning was simple and pretty stark. As they put it in their statement, they saw the U.S. raid as an extremely dangerous precedent. It wasn't just about Maduro. It was about the stability of the entire region. This really gets to the core of the global concern. If the world's most powerful military can just decide to enter another country and remove its leader, what does that mean for international law? It kind of shakes the very foundation of national sovereignty that has kept global politics in balance for centuries. Which brings us to right now. You've got a nation just hanging in the balance. Its former president is in a New York courtroom awaiting trial. Its new leader is under incredible pressure from Washington. And the whole world is just watching, trying to figure out what this all means. The big, crucial question is, what happens next?